A quick reminder of it's not very imaginative when we came up with the name of Massport, because it's just a combination of two countries, Malaysia and Singapore. And for those who know a bit of history, Malaysia and Singapore were both colonies of Britain, England. And originally, when Malaysia sought independence in 1957, Singapore was a part of Malaysia, but it ceded from Malaysia to become its own republic in 1965. But having said that, a lot of Malaysians do live, Malaysians work in Singapore, and many Singaporeans have relatives in Malaysia. So despite the fact that there is an international border, there are a lot of family ties as well as historical ties. This is where I work, in the University of Malaya Medical Center in Kuala Lumpur. And we started treating patients with leukemia since the mid-70s. But subsequently, what happened was in the late or mid-1990s, there was a drive to try and unite the few cancer centers in Malaysia to try and use a similar protocol for ALL. And ALL, of course, being the commonest childhood cancer, was the most important one to have a common national protocol for. So at that time, the key philosophy was to try and treat patients in a simple manner without much toxicity, because after they got their diagnosis in Kuala Lumpur, a lot of these patients returned to their home state, which are many miles away from the center, the treating center. And they were managed by general pediatricians as well as people who did not have a lot of pediatric training. So it was important to develop a protocol that was easy to give. And so it was basically a 3-drug induction phase, followed by intermediate dose methotrexate, 2 grams, and thereafter maintenance, very easy. And these were the results. After about 7 years and 300 over patients accrued, overall survival, event-free survival was 56%, and the 56%, and overall survival was about 65%. Even in the best risk group, these were patients who were NCI low risk, the outcome was still not very good, with 5-year event-free survival of 65%. So this was very much lower than what you expect in other developed countries. So what happened in 2002 was, this is my boss, Professor Hai Peng Lin, and he reached out to colleagues south of the border, and I'm sure a lot of us listened to Prof. Kwa's talk yesterday on LCH, as well as Prof. Ellen Yeo's lecture on the Lancet Oncology initiative. So the plan was to try and learn from our colleagues in Singapore, because they had very good results. So this then led to the formation of the Malaysia-Singapore group, predominantly focusing on ALL, and this was the trial. The trial was called the Massport Ll 203 trial, and basically it used the BFM backbone. And importantly, patients were stratified based on parameters which were not as simple as just the NCI risk criteria of age, T or B, as well as presenting white count. So there was the introduction of cytogenetics as well as minimal residual disease to decide in which arm the patients were going to be treated on. For the Singapore people, for the Singapore collaborators, it was not such a challenge to set this up, because they had been working in collaboration with the people of Hong Kong to have a collaborative trial. But for us, what it meant was to try and get an approval approval from our local institution to have a clinical trial involving children, and that was a first. And then we had to find a lot of money because we had to try and enroll patients into this trial. We had to provide cytogenetic facilities to analyze cytogenetics. And then we also had to biobank specimens, and this was again another new thing for us. We decided that to try and get some semblance of quality, we should not have two centers doing minimal residual disease tracking, but we then transported specimens to the central lab in Singapore. So of course we had to have the ability to process samples as well as and to transport the samples across. What we did was we collated the samples on a weekly basis and then send them across on dry ice. Also, we had a database between the two countries, and in those days, I'm talking about over nearly 20 years ago, there was no proper online platform. So what we relied on was emails and telephone calls. So what I would like to share here is that from scratch, we started from a situation where there was no, but apart from the hospital lab that did service, there was no research lab, and so we had to start from zero. So the first thing was to find space, and we found some space at the end of a ward. Funds were raised to buy equipment and reagents, and I'm particularly proud of this photograph because it's the first thermocycler bought as a contribution from two local politicians. And then a massive fundraising campaign. This is, I'm not sure if people know Ralph Schumacher, the brother of Michael Schumacher. He also helped raise funds when we had Formula One in Kuala Lumpur, and various other NGOs as well as corporations. So this helped to fund salary of staff that manage the clinical trial. So 7 or 8 years on, we closed the trial in 2010, and the results were published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology, whereby you can see standard risk patients, the 6-year EFS had gone up to 93%. And of course, this is combined with the Singapore data, but the Malaysian data alone, and Malaysia contributed 2/3 of the patients on this trial, was close to 90%, was 89%. So we managed to push up our standard risk survival rates from 65 to 89, and that was a great achievement for us. Other things that we have tried to do would actually to fill the gaps of knowledge that are available because of the ethnic diversity peculiar to Southeast Asia. So we are mainly people who are of Malay ethnicities and Southern Chinese. And uniquely, people of this part of the world have variants that are sensitive to thiopurines, for example, both due to TPMT as well as NUDT15. So these were things that we were able to study because of our geographic location. In summary, Malaysia-Singapore Leukemia Group started initially as a 2-center collaboration. Now there are 4 centers, and we hope to expand to more centers in Malaysia. What's important is that it served as a catalyst for the development of a pediatric oncology research lab dedicated to research rather than the hospital-based one, which mainly is focused on service. The spillover effects include proper infrastructure and governance for clinical trials. So since then, we have collaborated in trials which are outside of just ALL, and that's because we already now have the infrastructure for that. Of course, education has been one of the other important spillover effects where our clinical specialists get to train and exchange as well as our scientists. So in short, I think even for those who have to start from scratch, where there is a will, there is a way. We are very, very fortunate that we have a lot of corporate partners as well as members of the public who have a soft spot for children with cancer and are very generous to support our cause. So with that, thank you again to the organizers for inviting me to share a little bit on the Massport group. Thank you.